Welcome, everyone, to the Co-Creators Convergence Thursday night Creator Convo. I'm Noelle Marshall, and you'll notice that my beloved Bob is not here tonight. He's held up at a meeting. He'll be here a little later to join us because he really wanted to be here. And I'm going to just welcome my good friend, Reverend Cindy Grimes from Ocala, Florida, and someone she introduced me to, a wonderful therapist who uses psychedelics in her treatments, Lynn Williamson Grigas. So thank you all for coming. And, before we get started here, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Co-Creators Convergence, and then we'll come back. I'll do a formal introduction of Cindy and then pass it over to you two. And I'll be doing tech tonight, seeing how Bob is MIA. So I'll be right back. Let me start screen and tell you a little bit about the Co-Creators Convergence and the wonderful, wonderful guests we have coming up this month. So that is a little bit about the Co-Creators Convergence. Now what I'd like to do is introduce my good friend, Reverend Cindy Grimes. Reverend Cindy Grimes is the spiritual director of Ocala Center for Spiritual Living. Over 20 years ago, Cindy found not only her spiritual community, she found her call to ministry. By 2015, she completed CSL's practitioner training and ministerial program, graduating with a master's degree in consciousness studies. In addition to serving as spiritual director of CSL Ocala, Cindy has been an entrepreneur, social worker, teacher, editor, magazine publisher, workshop facilitator, and restorative practice trainer. She uses his experiences as a wife, mother, and grandmother to inform her messages, making them down to earth, relevant, and engaging. Her intention is that everyone who finds CSL Ocala finds the sense of coming home to an essence of who they are. And you can find out more about the Center for Spiritual Living at www.ocalacsl.org. And there's more about Cindy that I can't fit into all this time here, but she'll be back June 13th, and she's going to be talking about one of my favorite subjects, something I think that is really amazing, is restorative justice, as well as her Toastmasters program that she does in the prisons. So welcome, Cindy, and thank you for bringing Lynn. So I'm going to turn the talking stick over to you two beautiful beings. I'm here to serve, and whatever you need. We'd like to have people put your questions and comments in the chat until we open it up for questions, probably 20, 30 minutes at the end. So with that, thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Noelle. I'm so honored to be part of this conversation and for that great intro, but especially honored to be introducing my dear friend, Lynn Williamson Grigas. We became fast friends. It hasn't been all that long, but when you meet somebody and you realize you have that soul connection, you can become very fast friends and at a very deep level. And so that's what happened with Galen and I. And we both have just hearts of service and a desire to make things better in where we live. And it's just such a joy to watch people's lives transform. And so we share that love and that purpose. And Lynn is using the space at the Center for Spiritual Living in her practice. And I just want to share a little bit about her background. Lynn Grigas is a licensed mental health counselor and credentialed addictions professional. She completed the MDMA therapy training program through the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies, aka MAPS, in 2021. She is the director of psychedelic therapies in Ocala, Florida, where she facilitates private and group psychedelic medicine sessions, workshops, trainings, and retreats. She is a featured speaker and presenter throughout the world, combining her experience as an educator with her expertise as a psychotherapist to assist people in living the best lives possible. And you can find out more about her at www.gaylyn.net. And so that's all about Lynn, and it's such a blessing to have her at the Center for Spiritual Living and offering her services to the folks that come to the center. It's really just a beautiful thing to watch people grow and expand and transform and learn, and I'm grateful to be part of it. So take it over, Lynn.
Thank you so much, Cindy, for the lovely introduction and the words of real recognition of how spirit works and brought us together and has just continued to blossom in so many ways. And Noelle, I thank you and Bob for the invitation to be here and to present with everyone. Thank you so much. I'm going to try something here. We're going to do a little bit of a screen share and see if it works with the PowerPoint. So the centering does come from my book, Psychedelics, Dreams, and Rituals. It's not my poem, but it's a lovely poem that was written by Browning, and it's called Paraclesis. And I think it really will help us kind of come into this experience that we're going to be sharing in today. Truth is within ourselves. So just kind of take that thought in. And if you would like to close your eyes as you're listening to this, if that feels comfortable to you, or just let these words wash over you. Again, truth is within ourselves. It takes no rise from outward things, whate'er you may believe. There is an inmost center in us all, where truth abides in fullness and around. Wall upon wall, the gross flesh hems it in, this perfect, clear perception, which is truth. A baffling and perverting carnal mesh binds it and makes all error, and to know rather consists in opening out a way whence the imprisoned splendor may escape. Then, in effecting entry for a light, suppose it to be without. And so just breathe into that for a moment and just reflect on that. The imprisoned splendor is within us all. And the light, that brilliant light, brighter than the light that we can see outside of us, is within us all. And that is truly where truth abides, in its fullness. And so we're going to touch on that, just to feel the essence of that in a co-creative way tonight as we share in our presentation. Isn't that a beautiful poem? I love that poem. So that's a Robert Browning poem that describes truth being in each and every one of us. So we are co-creators and cultural creatives, and we're a community of creatives. And in that, we create so many things. Perhaps you're creating or recreating your life, a business. Perhaps you're running a spiritual community. It could be a mission for your own life. And as a part of this co-creative process, there's all kinds of aspects of it, from starting out with the idea that comes to us and maybe reveals itself to us from within. And also it comes within the context of the psychedelic medicine. So I want to touch on that, not only from some of the things that I've experienced, but also some of the experiences I've had with others. I was very fortunate to have a wonderful afternoon that I spent with Barbara Marx Hubbard. And I actually interviewed her for one of my books, my earlier books, called Golden Eggs, Spiritual Wisdom for Birthing Your Life. And so Barbara was kind enough to invite us to her house, and we sat on her porch in California, and we had a cup of herbal tea, and we just chatted with one another. And of course, it was so wonderful, Noelle, that you put her question. And remember, all of our quests begin with a question. And Barbara was so good at that. And I love this question: what is my gift to the shift in humanity? And so we're going to ask ourselves that question tonight. And one of the things that she wrote that she said to me when we were together, and I captured it and put it in the book, Golden Egg, Spiritual Wisdom for Birthing Our Life. She said, we're moving toward regeneration. And interestingly enough, this is a topic that I'm going to be speaking on at the Center for Spiritual Living, on what is regeneration? How do we regenerate ourselves? And Barbara was talking about this. Of course, she was talking about this. She was a futurist. She was talking about this decades before most. Although Charles Fillmore in Unity, at the turn of the century, last century, was also talking about regeneration. The time for regeneration on the planet is now. Regeneration begins to occur when our genius is activated through creativity. We are turned on. So just kind of reflect on that regeneration is connected to our creativity. And Barbara said, I believe that the life purpose and regeneration are connected. And I'll be honest, many people who are coming to work with me some are in their, early 20s, and some of them are in their late 70s. I mean, that's the broad range, age range that I'm working with. And it's interesting because they're both asking somewhat of the same question, but from a different perspective. Like, what is the meaning and purpose of my life? So, and here Barbara's saying that I believe that life purpose and regeneration are connected. And so those, particularly in the 60s and 70s and 80s, that's probably about the oldest person that I've had a psychedelic journey experience with. She was 80 years old. She is 80 years old. And she was asking this question too. If we have no desire for further creativity, degeneration occurs, but regeneration occurs spontaneously. So just kind of capture that thought. Ultimately, I believe we will learn to die by choice and to live by choice. We will live as long as we have a passion to create. Love those words from Barbara. Just so delightful to kind of meditate on them and see how they speak to our deepest self. So from Maslow's hierarchy, which we're all very familiar with, the bottom rungs of the hierarchy are the physiological needs, of course, safety, love, belonging, esteem. Those are all very important. And as Maslow got older, he and his wife were continuing to do this study, And usually the old paradigm of this model left off at self-actualization. Like that was the ultimate goal, was self-actualization. But he and his wife later in his life came up with the next rung that he felt was as important, and that is self-transcendence. And the self-transcendence goes beyond the ego self, right? Beyond the ego encapsulated flesh. It's not just what am I here to do and get and have for me, but what am I here to also help co-create in the world? How am I here to serve something greater than myself, greater than my ego? And this is a really important part of this process to kind of reflect on. So in my book, Psychedelics, Dreams, and Rituals, it is a guidebook. It asks these deep questions. It actually asks the existential questions that we need to grapple with as we're making these deeper inner explorations. And the first 50 pages of it just helps you to kind of delve deeper into your life. So I'm just going to give you a teeny tiny little taste of what's some of it in the book. I'll look at the triune pathway because I'm looking at psychedelics, dreams, and rituals as a three-stranded cord. And a cord of three strands is not easily broken. I'm living Ecclesiastes. So we're looking to modify and make what we're doing internally give us as much strength as possible. Now, when we're working in these realms of non-ordinary states of consciousness, they're all reached through these various ways of entering into the non-ordinary states. Through psychedelics, we enter into the non-ordinary state of consciousness through dreams. And when we participate in ritual and ceremony, it also enhances and puts us in that non-ordinary state of consciousness. I started writing on this 30 years ago when I wrote about my master's thesis on transformative ritual and ceremony and non-ordinary states of consciousness. So I never thought in my wildest dreams that I would be alive to see us actually being able to facilitate this, also using some of the psychedelic substances that are available to us today. So let's just kind of look at some of these little existential questions. And I want you to kind of take notes, and you can write things down as we're going along. And I mentioned the existential questions, who I was, who I am, who do I want to be? If we could answer those three questions with some authenticity, it gives us a little bit of a clue, right? It gives us a little bit of a window into our own soul. Who was I? What is my history? What is my, and I kind of call that the museum. How do I go back into the museum of my life and look? And who am I now? And who do I want to be? And I also use a really nice analogy of a bus. And the bus is that place where we meet the parts of ourselves. So there's a child part, there's an adult part, there's maybe a part of us that may be anxious or fearful. And there's all these different aspects of ourself, all these different parts of ourself, and all the parts are good. There's no part that's bad. There's no part that's going to be kicked off the bus. And all the parts of us have something for us to gain, something for us to learn, something. And as we are understanding these parts of ourselves and able to collaborate with the different parts, we have a more successful life. We have a more successful life strategy. And we can create new patterns in order to function at our optimal level, right? Back to Maslow's hierarchy. So if we have fear on the bus, which all of us do to a certain degree, there's things that might be scary in our life or things we're anxious or fearful about. Fear can be on the bus, but we don't necessarily want fear driving the bus, right? And so that's the big question. What part of me is driving the bus? And depending on who's driving the bus, that's the kind of ride we're going to have. So the triune pathway 2 is about dreams. And dreams are a really important part of our inner world, our inner transformation. And I'm going to touch on co-creatives and entrepreneurs who've used psychedelics and dreams particularly to help in their evolution. And Einstein equals MC squared. Part of the inspiration for that came from a dream. Elias Howe created the very first sewing machine that you see pictured here, and it came out of a dream. It was a pretty wild dream, actually. He was trying to get the idea of how to make the thread and the needle go through the fabric, and he had this dream that he was in a pot of boiling water, and he was in a cannibalistic time, and all of the natives were dancing around him as he was boiling in this cauldron of water, and he was being cooked. And when he looked at the spears that all of the people that were chanting and singing and going around the cauldron, when he looked at the spears, they all had this particular eyelet in the end of the spear that was open. And he looked at that and he said, oh, I see where the eyelet needs to be on the needle, because they were all carrying the spears that looked like the eyelet that was in the sewing machine. And this became the way that our clothes that we're wearing today became automated in the sewing machine process. The triune pathway 3 is on rituals. And of course, we know that rituals help us touch into ourselves, into healing community, and that helps us in connection with ourselves and with a community larger than ourselves. And that's in our healing and transformation. So that when we enter non-ordinary states of consciousness, we're entering into this shift that takes place in our perceptions. Does a rose bush have thorns, or does a thorn bush have roses? It depends on your perspective. We've never seen the earth until about 65, 70 years ago, when the first astronauts went out and they looked back and they saw this little blue orb. Those were the first pictures that we had of what our planet looked like. And now look where we are going. We're galaxies upon galaxies with the telescopes and the footage that we have today, which is just spectacular. So that shift in perspective again. And of course, the caterpillar does not know, or probably would ever believe, that inside that little worm is going to be a butterfly that will emerge one day. It's a shift in perspective. So there's many famous scientists that have reported that psychedelics gave them new insights. And I'm working with legal psychedelics in the United States. That legal psychedelic is ketamine. I do ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. I'm going to the Netherlands for the month of June. And when I'm in the Netherlands, I'm going to be studying at the International Conference of Psychedelic Research and also doing a workshop there. But in the Netherlands, truffles and psilocybin, which is truffles are a derivative of psilocybin mushrooms, are legal. So depending on where you are in the United States, Colorado and Oregon and parts of California have made psilocybin available, but generally speaking, it's only ketamine that's available in the United States. That's why you see many people going outside of the United States. But soon, very soon, probably toward the end of this year, we're also going to have other tools in the psychedelic toolbox, which will include MDMA. And I've been trained in MDMA, which through the MAPS, as Cindy said. And that's an empathogen. It's a heart opening kind of experience. Ketamine and MDMA are not classic psychedelics in that sense, but they do have that psychedelic effect, and they can bring different kinds of insights and awareness and tap into that non-ordinary state beyond the default mode network. So I'm going to touch on some of the people who have had these transcendent experiences and transcended their ordinary way of seeing life and seeing their work, and gave them a creative glimpse into their own extraordinary inventiveness. The double helix was discovered by the molecular biologist Francis Crick, and he told his Cambridge friend Dick Kemp that he was surprised when he perceived the double helix shape while on LSD. So the double helix My science teacher never told me this. I just want to say that. Never said anything about how LSD was that the double helix that I had to memorize in biology class came from an LSD experience. Electronic brain stimulation, John C. Lilly. He was a neuroscientist and significant figure in the field of electronic brain stimulation. And he reported that he experimented with LSD and ketamine. Nobel Prize in Chemistry to Carrie Banks Mullis. He was an American biochemist who won the 1993 Nobel Prize in Chemistry for making valuable improvements to the polymerase chain reaction, the PCR technique. And he told California Monthly he took plenty of LSD. Steve Jobs, and this is much more well known. He's the pioneer of personal computer, of course, and just really sparked the whole computer revolution. He reported that he experimenting with LSD in the 1960s was one of 2 or 3 most important things he had done in his life. Mathematical theories from Ralph Abraham. He was a prominent American mathematician. He discussed how psychedelic insights had helped influence his mathematical theories. And musicians. I mean, we would say, oh, well, this makes sense. Of course, the musicians. We don't think of mathematicians and molecular biologists. And, musicians, though, lots of wonderful music. So musical lovers and the community of people who've been touched by many of these fine musicians and had psychedelic medicine as their kind of creative process. The Beatles, I Am a Walrus, Jefferson Airplane, White Rabbit, Grateful Dead, Black Peter, Montreal, Lysergic Bliss, Jenny Lewis, Acid Tongue, Chance the Rapper, Acid Rain. I got to actually see the Flaming Lips do this Pink Robots in Denver when I went to the MAPS conference last year. It was pretty wild. It was good. Also soul, jazz, and country music. The soul singer Ray Charles reported that LSD allowed him some version of sight and influenced his song My World. And jazz great John Coltrane was a regular LSD user who had the non-ordinary state of consciousness to create his music and have a spiritual experience that was reflected directly in one of his songs called Om. And country music, Casey Musgrave's song Slow Burn. She wrote the song sitting on her porch in one setting, and it was from a non-ordinary state that she was in. Of course, Duane Allman is a famous for this incredible music kind of that, and almost like a new country rock genre that he created, this Southern rock. And all of the people in the band had the mushroom tattooed on their calf, except for one of the band members. So they would go out in the fields and pick the mushrooms and write the music. So Einstein said that we can't solve the problem at the same level of consciousness that created it. So we have to go, if we can't solve our problems or kind of create new things from that same level of consciousness, we need to find ways safely, effectively, with lots of love and support that we can enter non-ordinary states of consciousness so that we go beyond the level of consciousness that we're in. And of course, we're always, when we're working with the medicines, we're working with dreams, we begin with intention. What is it that I would like to gain or out of this experience? What is my intention? Intention means a lot in our journey in life. So I just want to give you a few intentions just to kind of touch into these. And whatever you're working on in your life, whether you're creating something, writing a book, running a business, having a family, kind of coming into these deeper existential questions for yourself and understanding yourself better. Here's some sample intentions, might give you a little spark, and you can kind of use these even at your dream time. Write these write your intention and invite your dreams to come at night. On the website, gaylin.net, I have a dream meditation that's free, that you can use right before bedtime to help you not only go to sleep, but invite your dream world to open up to you in a much more meaningful and powerful way. It's an invitation, right? We have to invite. And sometimes we haven't sent the invitation. So, so letting go of ego identification, letting go of control. I'll say that's probably a really big one where, we seem like we're really clutching, we hold our jaw tight and we get that little TMJ going there, and we hold our shoulders up, and, we're sometimes we're holding that tension in our knees, and of course our body is affected by all of this. So part of what we want to do is kind of come to that place of sweet surrender in safety, with trust, in a safe place. Set and setting are very important, meaning what's your mindset and what's the setting that you're physically in. Only comparing myself to myself, experiencing more of my inner healer, intuition, intelligence, getting out of default mode. Do I want the problem or do I want the solution? I like that question. Knowing at this moment, I already have everything I need. If I ask, I will receive it, and help me see only love and unmask fear. Please feel free to use any of these. And these all come from the book, of course. So I'm hoping they're helpful for you and just kind of setting intention. So you can write your own intention for your business, for your life, for your dream work, to kind of set the tone. Ask for what you would like to receive. Also, when we're doing some of this work, we are bringing up some things that can be somewhat unsettling for us. Part of this work may also bring up some grief and tears, and the tears are healing. It's just the way our body has rebalancing itself. Biochemically, tears are some of the most healing things that we can allow our body to release. And some people, when they're working with me as a therapist, they're like, I haven't cried for years, and they have just so much sadness that they've just stuffed down and compartmentalized. So we need to be prepared for when this extra energy gets released. And it is a release that happens when we release our sadness, when we release our tears, when we release sometimes our anger or frustration. It releases energy. So we need to know how to regulate ourselves, and do our grounding, do our breathing exercises, doing our mindfulness practices. And I know you're all doing these already. So do your spiritual activity, do a personal ritual. If there's a lot of fear and doubt and frustration and anger and you've been hanging on to, give yourself permission to do the burning bowl ceremony, write things down, take it out, burn it, do your own cleansing. Ritual and ceremony are really an important way to kind of prepare yourself and to ready yourself, or to use at the end of something to make closure. Here are the cycles of grief and loss. We know these, but it's just touching into them just to understand that we're going to go through, when we have this loss, we're going to go through some denial, like, oh my gosh, this can't happen. Noelle and I were talking about, some people who have passed from our lives kind of unexpectedly. And there's that, at first it's almost like a denial, like you can't even believe this person isn't on the planet anymore. And yet, they are. And then that sometimes is kind of, it can roll into anger. And we don't often think about anger and grief together, but, this is Kubler-Ross. She saw this, she saw these patterns. Sometimes we're angry that the person, we feel like they've left us, they've abandoned us, and so it's normal. It's okay to feel that, not to get stuck in it, but of course to allow those feelings to wash over us. And then bargaining, oh, I'm going to be okay, I can get through this. And then depression, which is and then finally acceptance. But we don't move through them in this neat little, I'm first going to be in denial and then in anger and bargaining, and I'll finally move through depression to acceptance. It doesn't go that way. It goes from denial to bargaining, and bargaining to anger, and then anger to depression, and then depression back to bargaining. And then, finally, after a whole cycle, maybe eventually moving into some acceptance, but then maybe going back into anger again. So these are the stages. We'll kind of bounce back and forth through some of them, and that's okay. It's just, and to accept that this is part of the healing process. Here's some simple grounding and centering phrases that you can use anytime that you're, feeling dysregulated, anytime that you feel as though things are coming up and you might need to have like a simple phrase, an affirmation, a mantra that you allow yourself to think about. Go with the flow. They say that people who are flexible are the people who are the most successful. And I agree with that. I don't think you should be so flexible that you allow yourself to be a doormat and let people walk all over you. That's not being flexible. That's being taken advantage of, right? But flexibility in our life is really important. The more rigid we are, the more pain we're going to have sometimes. And there's an old Chinese proverb, the reed that is not flexible will be broken. Right. So we don't want to have this rigidity. We want to have this flexibility. And so that kind of this affirmation, go with the flow, trust and let go. I'm willing to see what I need to see. Now, when we're in the psychedelic journey, sometimes it's almost like a dream experience where things may come to us. There may be a staircase and we can go up or down. There may be a door and we can choose whether we want to open that door or not. There may be galaxies. We may be out in space and just exploring stars and planets. What can I learn? I am not alone. I am safe. I am protected. This is what I signed up for. That's a good one, by the way. This is what I signed up for. I sometimes remind people of that when they're, when we're doing the journey. It's like, it's okay. This is what you signed up for. This is what we're here for. They're like, really? This is it? I was like, yeah. And, the release is very effective. I lean into what wants to be revealed, breathe, and take the next step. So there's also inside of us, and I'm not going to go deeply into this other than to say we need to invite again and again and again that inner healer part of us to be a part of our healing journey and make it a very conscious part of who's on our bus, right? We want this part kind of in the forefront of the bus or driving the bus. And that inner healer part, I'm using that. It can include the divine self, the Buddha nature, the higher power, God, goddess, creative intelligence, divine matrix, the universe, Christ within, the Tao. It's known by many names, but all the same healing presence of inner beingness that is a part of you, that is a part of our co-creative experience, that we are co-creators with the divine. And as co-creators, we are constantly touching into that source that then we can manifest and utilize for health, for healing, for creativity, to be co-creators in the world. All right. So I invite you to write a, journaling is really good. Write a note in your journal to your inner healing intelligence and invite it to be an active part of your life, of your journey. Be connected to your source in that way. George Bernard Shaw, I'm just going to end with this little quote and then we'll take some questions. This I put in the book as well. Life is no brief candle to me. It's a sort of splendid torch, which I've got to hold up for the moment. And I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations. So that is the presentation part. I am open to questions, thoughts, anything that kind of maybe landed on you that you're curious about.
Hey, Lynn, I saw some questions in the chat.
Okay, Let me see. I didn't have the chat open. Let me put that.
Yes, so it looks
Why
like
don't we go
Noelle was
ahead and stop
asking.
your screen share, and I'll put us in gallery view.
Okay.
Right, so the first question was, is LSD addictive?
No, and that's really interesting. LSD is not addictive.
Uh,
There's different types of ways that some of the psychedelics are natural. That means that they grow from the ground, like the mushrooms. Although the psilocybin that they'll probably have that's going to be delivered through pharmaceutical companies will be synthesized. It will be synthesized. I'm going to LSD, ketamine, MDMA, those are made as a chemical compound. Particularly you can use any substance too much and it can have a negative effect. If you're using it to mood alter with. And, I've worked for 30 years in drug and alcohol, in and out of drug and alcohol rehab centers. And the key component of the addiction is that, are you using it to mood alter? And the other key point is your life unmanageable? And so if you're experiencing unmanageability and you're using any substance to mood alter with, that would be a slippery slope there. That would be an indicator that you're tipping to that toward that addiction. And any addiction, it's very painful to be in a family where there is addiction as well, because it's a very slow suicide and you're watching this person day by day poison themselves. And I have such empathy for the families. I've worked with them for years, to have to walk through that with as much grace and courage as possible. So the substances generally, if you use them properly, are not addictive. Psilocybin is probably, because I've studied in the Netherlands a couple of years ago, and I'm going back next month, and we're going to be using psilocybin in the retreat that I'm going to be doing in the Netherlands, is the least addictive. In fact, if you take too much, it has no effect whatsoever. It's got a natural governor on it. You take too much, it's like, nope, you're not going to have anything, no experience. That's enough. I mean, it's like, and it is non-addictive, and it has so many regenerative properties to it that actually help to stimulate neurogenesis, in the brain. The LSD does too. Now, curious that you mentioned LSD, because the FDA just approved LSD as a breakthrough drug to be studied for anxiety, because one dose of LSD can stop anxiety like nothing else that they have ever seen or discovered. One dose. So again,
was it also useful for depression? LSD?
The ketamine actually is one of the most effective for treatment-resistant depression. Depression that's been long held. I've worked with numerous people that have suicidal ideation or have had contemplated suicide and had a plan. And, the ketamine is wonderful for addressing that long, deep held depression and the treatment resistant depression. The studies on it are, I have a friend in the Netherlands. She's a neurobiologist. She can quote all the research. I'm like the therapeutic heart. We're doing the retreat together, which is great because you've got the neurobiologist and the heartfelt therapist, kind of unified together in a retreat setting. And she worked for MAPS and she set up all the trial studies in Europe. depression is addressed through the ketamine. It can be mitigated, and the suicidal ideation, stops.
Oh.
For many people. Yes, hello.
Can you tell me what a session is like? Like if you're doing a session for food addiction or sessions,
Sure.
I don't know how, how long
Yes.
does it last, or, where does it take place? That kind of thing.
Sure. So usually I call it the 2-1-2. I'll do at least 2 pre-sessions to kind of prepare people and get them 2 individual 1-hour sessions. And we go over what is it that you would like to kind of address, what's your intention, what do we need to do for grounding, a lot of what I shared with you tonight. And then we'll do a 3 to 4 hour medicine session together. The 3 to 4 hour medicine session, I'm with you the whole time. So that I'm right there in a kind of like the midwife for the experience, right? I'm the midwife for the soul, which is like the coolest thing in the world. It's why I love the work that I do and passionate about it, because it is a soul rebirth in a sense. And it looks like that sometimes, they're going through like this rebirth experience. I've worked with people who've had food addictions, anorexia, bulimia. It's difficult. And there's a great story in the book about one woman that I worked with, and she did not realize, I talk about some of the, I've studied with Stan Groff, Dr. Stan Groff. He really emphasizes not just what happens after our birth, but what happens pre-birth. And that sometimes our trauma actually is happened in the womb, right? Whether how we're born, how we had to struggle, was the umbilical cord around our neck, did we feel stuck? Some of the anxiety that we experience in our life today and if we feel claustrophobic or stuck at times, it's because that was the experience in the womb. And if we can remap that experience, which he did with thousands of people, and I get to do as well, then they move through that experience more effectively and they're not stuck anymore. So this one woman I was working with, I asked her about her birth. Was there anything significant? And she said, oh yeah, my mother's womb was dying. And at 6 months old, she was in the womb and that was collapsing and dying on her. And so sometimes she could get the nutrients from the womb and she would just gobble it down. And at other times she was literally starving. And so in the womb, it began to pattern her anorexia and bulimia even before she was born. It was stunning. And once we got to that, and then we did the medicine session together, because, that's important. That's the kind of discovery we're doing pre-session, pre-medicine session. And then in the medicine session, she brought her mother had passed away, and she brought this lovely blanket, this quilt. I didn't know it at the time, but her mother had made this quilt for her, and she wanted to have it in the session because people bring things that they want to have in the session. And I got such a strong sense that I was, and I always ask about touch, and is it okay if I touch your hand or touch your arm, or, put my hand on your shoulder? And, I had this really strong sense that I was to just wrap her in this blanket. And again, I didn't know her mother had made this blanket for her. And I wrapped her in the blanket, and I totally had this experience as if her mother's arms were coming right through mine. And I just held her and rocked her. And all that kind of sorrow and sadness and angst and all of the, the anorexia and the bulimia and all of that just melted away. I am serious. This woman is a nurse. She's an RN. And to this day, we've been working together for a little while because she wanted to keep going. I see her like once a month or something. She has not had any of those really dramatic, traumatic, anxiety, depression, anorexia, bulimia experiences. So she did her inner healing work, and I get to be in the front row and just go, oh my gosh, this is so beautiful. This is amazing. And and then after, there's 2 integrative sessions. So there's 2 pre-sessions for 1 hour each, a 4-hour medicine session, and then 2 post sessions that we do the integration work. And the really cool thing is I get to do it at the Center for Spiritual Living because I have my office at the center. It's lovely. And we get to, the space is already energized with so much love and so much prayer and so much healing. It's different than a clinical setting for sure. And so they're entering into that space, set and setting. The setting is already kind of a sacred container. So that only enhances the work as well.
And where is that?
At the Center for Spiritual Living in Ocala, where Cindy and I work. Cindy's the spiritual leader and spiritual director, and I have office space that I rent from the center, and I rent my office and the medicine room where we on Sundays it's used for the kids, which is wonderful too, because you got their energy in it. And then we convert it during the week into this wonderful medicine room with lights and candles, and just really set a beautiful space for people to do their healing.
I wondered which room it is because I've been to that center many, many times over the years. Okay, so now I know where it is now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Ocala is Central Florida. So
Correct.
horse
Yeah.
capital, right? So they say.
And we're doing
Yes.
the ketamine assisted psychotherapy on a horse farm as well. So we combine this connection with the horses and the healing energy of the horses. We'll do that first. And then in an outdoor setting with the horses, we have a beautiful place that's called Tudor Farms. Pegasus Horse Wisdom is the website where I'm doing the ketamine assisted psychotherapy after Sherry Villa does the equine therapy. So we've combined those 2 modalities of healing together as well.
So is all this work is individual or do you do group too?
I do group too. The groups are really, I do a 4-week group. The groups meet Tuesday nights at the center, and we do a 3-hour medicine session together. It's a small group, usually 4 to 5 people at the very most. My husband, David, is trained. He's ordained clergy, and he's taken the Polaris Insight training, the San Francisco-based ketamine-assisted certification program through Polaris Insight. And so we hold space together as husband and wife, which is really cool too, because there's another kind of energetic field because we've been married for 23 years. So we both love the work. He's got over 30 years of recovery as well. So he brings that into, the space with his incredible knowledge of the Bible and spirituality and philosophy. I mean, he's an incredibly well-read man. You ask him a history question, just be prepared to really listen, because he's going to give you whether it's the history of philosophy or spirituality or metaphysics. He's great.
No. Any other questions, Olivia? You want to jump in here?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much, Galen.
My pleasure.
I had a wonderful time with Stan and Christina years ago.
Oh my goodness.
Training with them, yeah. And yeah, it was wonderful. They were not using psychedelics then.
No.
I was training what became a psychologist, but in the early days, I was a psychotherapist, and I was also integrative hands-on practitioner, holistic practitioner.
Wow.
So what I was doing with them, though, was the early holotropic breathing.
Mhm.
And so that was really very interesting, the way that people, we were in a group, and people experience all sorts of altered states with that. So I'm curious whether, if you've done both, and if you see the parallels between them or not. That's one question I have, and then I have another question.
Yes. Just a side note, I was able to see Stan last year in
Oh.
Denver. He did come to the MAPS conference, and it was
Oh,
just
wonderful.
so, he has had a mild stroke, so it has affected
I
his
know.
speech a
Yeah.
bit, but it hasn't slowed him down at all.
Oh,
So, and yes, in one of the treatment centers that I worked in here in Ocala, it's called the Refuge. We worked in the holotropic breath work with our clients. It's very powerful work.
Yeah.
So now moving forward, what I've done and we do this at the Center for Spiritual Living as well, is we do the holotropic breath work, a breath workshop with ketamine assisted. So we
Oh,
use a
wow.
very low dose of ketamine, and we enter into those holotropic states, and we pair them together, and people have had magnificent experiences. And of course, it's heavily driven by a very, dynamic music track, which all of
Mhm.
these have been really, the music plays an incredibly important role. And
Yeah.
we're really mindful of the way those tracks are put together so
Yeah.
that they're most effective.
Yeah.
That's so wonderful, Olivia. Were you working out at Esalen?
No, he actually came to Boston, and I was we used one of the very first holistic clearinghouses centers, was called Interface, and he came and offered a week-long training. And then I've followed him ever since. I've read his books and stuff. And my other question, I wondered, I was a trauma therapist for
Mhm.
I wondered if you had worked with and maybe you answered this. I fell off the Wi-Fi and I got back on, so excuse me if I'm have you worked with veterans very much? Because I've heard that there's very good research now on veterans with LSD, and I wondered about psilocybin. I experienced psilocybin many years ago, but it was synthetic, and I felt it was the most spiritual journey I ever took. I was
Yes.
guided in LSD by one of my former Harvard professor colleagues, and I wasn't as moved by that, and we were in his house, there was music, we were guided, there was a small group of us. But the psilocybin was very, very powerful, even though it was synthetic. I have not done the actual mushrooms yet, but I'm thinking about it.
Yes. Yes, I work with veterans, and I work with first responders, and I work with police officers,
Oh,
and
good.
I have had incredible success. In fact,
Right.
there's one woman that, Cindy and I absolutely love, and she's just kind of like the embodiment of what this can be. She came to my office in a really just kind of in desperation. She was a female veteran. She had a lot of trauma, a deep, deep trauma, and she just wasn't being really heard at the VA and the other places. And the VA, all they wanted to do was put her on a whole bunch of medications, which she did for a while. But then the side effects of the medication, including the opioids and everything else, have such terrible side effects, including suicidal ideation. I mean,
Right.
it just, so she came to my office and somebody had directed her toward me, and we started working together. I found a way. She was homeless. She was living in a hotel with her then 3-year-old daughter. She was hanging on by her fingernails, literally, you know. And she said, I know I'm supposed to work with you. I don't know how, but I said, I go, you're right. I don't know how either, but we're going to work together. And we actually went to the Wounded Warriors, and through an organization called Centerstone, they funded her therapy. Now, they wouldn't fund the ketamine, but they would fund the therapy. So we got stabilized with the with her just doing the therapeutic process, which helped enormously. And then she was able to get enough money together herself where she could do the ketamine session. And she has it's almost like a miracle story. And you will hear her story one day, I promise you, because she's going to tell her story, and how she got her life back and regained her own power, her own sense of self. And she was able to go back and advocate for herself and get full benefits, which she had been fighting for a long time and denied. And now she's she has housing. Her little girl's autistic, and she's got lots of therapy for her little girl. She comes to the Center for Spiritual Living. She has a community of people that have surrounded her and love her and care for her. I know it's
Wonderful.
it's a beautiful story. and I'm sure one day, her name is Christina. You'll hear Christina's story, and you know,
That's
so
wonderful. Yeah.
it does.
And now it's permitted that she gets treatment and some of it paid for by her insurance. It's incredible, you know,
Yeah,
really
yeah.
wonderful.
So I do have a police officer that I've worked with. He's done incredibly well, and he shares his testimony on my website. You can see him. His name is Dan. And I was telling Noelle today, I did a ride along for 10 hours today with a Marion County Fire Rescue. It was a very busy day, needless to say. And I'm now finished with the they had a really good protocol program to be included in therapists who could be listed on a particular red line rescue website for first responders, so that they know they're getting a therapist who understands them and knows their culture and knows what it's like in the fire department. I have a little bit of a heartfelt connection here, though, because my father was a firefighter, and he was a career firefighter. So, I mean, being in the fire department and riding with the guys today in the ambulance and everything, it just felt so good, you know. I was like, okay. I felt my dad, of course, with me, you know, like, okay, Dad, here we go. I'm going to pay it forward. I'm going to help some of the guys that are helping us.
Yeah.
That's great. You know, going back in the Wayback Machine, one of my first jobs was at the U.S. Medical Research Institute for Chemical Defense. And the building I was actually in is where they did a lot of the experiments with LSD. And they just had like the padded rooms that they would give them this stuff. And you know, I had to go by what was then the nurse's station to get into my padded cell. But it was, we've come a long way, baby. Let's just
Yeah,
say
we have.
Yeah. And I was just thinking about Ram Dass and others, a lot of the, you know, the Berrigan brothers and, you know, the ones in the peace movement and
Timothy Leary.
Timothy
yeah.
Leary.
Yeah. And
So,
go ahead, Flo.
well, I was thinking of Ram Dass. Originally, he was, you know, doing it as a professor and then as for kicks. And then he went in the whole other direction and said, I want to get there without the drugs. And, you know, I grew up at a very strange time in Chicago. And when I was like 17, I tried psilocybin and LSD, but I was not under a therapist. I was running around a wild child in the city. And the last time I didn't do it, my friend was telling me, come on, let's do this for New Year's Eve. And I kept saying, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. And she says, come on, come on, come on. And so I took it, and she turned around and I threw it away. And I'm like, because I didn't want to do that anymore because it was so uncontrolled. You're running around as a teenage girl in the city, and who knows what the dosage was, because it just was what it was. And so I could imagine it being at a correct dose, guided by somebody who's loving and caring, and you're so vulnerable at that point. So I have thought of that for my issues with eating, because I'm an intelligent woman. I know what I'm supposed to eat. I know what's good for me. I'm not bulimic. I'm more of a binge eater type thing. And I'm trying to fill some hole with all this food. I don't know.
Yeah. And that's exactly what we would kind of look at as the intention. What wants to be filled with the sweetness that isn't being filled, and let that be revealed. Let that be shown. That can come to you in your dreams too. And just kind of watch, put a journal out there. I'll tell you one of the things that's interesting about the LSD that I've seen. The Beckley Foundation, Amanda Beckley, has done a tremendous amount of funding on LSD research, and she spoke at the Netherlands conference last year, and she had this woman who was in her late 80s, early 90s, dementia, didn't recognize her family, was completely kind of diminished in her cognition. And she, with permission, gave her a microdose of LSD, and all of a sudden her whole demeanor just completely changed. She looked around, she recognized her family members, she called them by name, she started smiling, she started telling stories about things that she remembered. It was like she just came back, and Amanda was telling the story and showing some pictures, and it's really that regenerative. I think this is really going to be fascinating to look at the impact with people who have dementia. And that's such a big issue for us today. Why are we degenerating and not regenerating, right? The beginning slide that I talked about with Barbara, how is that? How can we regenerate our brain and stay creative and stay engaged? And definitely some of these psychedelic medicines are helping and assisting with that.
That brings up, I was going to ask you about that, if there's been any research with like using it with autistic or people who are on the spectrum.
Not that I've seen any research on that, people on the spectrum. Some people say the people on the spectrum are already there.
Yeah. I've heard
they're already seeing much more bandwidth than we are, which is an interesting way to kind of, understand that. And they're very sensitive to some of the maybe other dimensions and insights that we don't usually tap into because our bandwidth is very narrow, and it's that small default mode network.
Wonderful. Welcome, Shelley. I hope you've been able to hear some of this wonderful presentation that Lynn has done. If you have any questions or you want to jump in, feel free, but no pressure.
I just wanted, well, actually, I've been listening, not the whole time, but about 45 minutes. And I just have really loved it. And I was really introduced to it through my daughter, who has done microdosing and said it so much, and all of her friends, and they're all becoming trainers, and Oregon, and they're all. And
good.
But it was really fascinating to me because I just had literally come off a call, because I have studied limbic imprinting for 12 years, and it was what I was doing with people was really helping them understand that experience of being so influenced by the womb and whatever's going on in that, and that's how we do our lives. And once we become aware of that, but I haven't heard, and it's just really bizarre because like she was like asking, like, I've never heard of that, and I've done all this other thing, and I'm explaining, and then here I come on this call, and come on, I haven't been on for a really long time, right, Noelle? And so I'm like, okay, all right, I got it.
Oh.
And so I've really enjoyed everything that you're sharing, and I think it's and I am, just to be really clear, like I mean, it'll be interesting. I do have one question for you. So I am really have been, let's just put it that way, all about, being able to do that work without taking anything. And only because I see how much abuse is going on with trying to do this on your own, or, anyway. So the extreme of and also the beauty of having someone who knows how to hold the space and has all the background that you're talking about. So, and I lived in Sarasota for years. Right now I'm in Maine, but the question I have for you is a curious question, just because I have a pacemaker. So how do you work with people that, have pacemakers, or does it even matter? So I was really curious.
I'm not the medical doctor, so the way this works is that I have a CAP collaborator who's an MD, and so it's just like being prescribed any other medication. So there's a medical evaluation that takes place, and through that it's a Zoom call, just like we're doing now. There's a list of questions that are answered, and then once you pass the medical evaluation, a prescription is written, and the prescription can either be mailed to you, or you can pick it up if you're here locally. And so it's just the same way any other prescription would be distributed, and it's then you take it yourself. Now, with ketamine particularly, the only contraindication is blood pressure, right? If you have uncontrolled high blood pressure, that would be a contraindication. But other than that, I've had people that have had, a couple weeks out of open heart surgery and had, stents put in, and, the doctor says you're good to go, so, and I've done ketamine sessions with them. So, ketamine is used often in surgery. Remember, this is a anesthetic. So, that one particularly, psilocybin, MDMA, I mean, each of them have their own kind of little, variations. But the main variation is how the onset of that particular substance, how long you stay in that substance, and how quickly you come out. So the beauty of the ketamine and why it's used so much therapeutically is because it has I'm using the sublinguals, not the IV ketamine. And so you put it underneath your tongue, it dissolves very slowly. It takes maybe about 20-30 minutes to go into it. You'll stay into it an hour and a half to 2 hours, and then you gently come down out of it. So it has, but when it's over, you're sober, within, that 3 or 4 hour time period afterwards, you can drive. So it's very easy to use in a therapeutic setting in an office, because you have this like 4 hour window, and the person can come in and do the medicine session and then leave and take themselves home. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank
and
you. That's great.
please let them know about the book, because the book is really a guidebook, Psychedelics, Dreams, and Rituals. And I would, if I had the wherewithal to do it, I would put this on a bus, the picture of the book in Oregon, just because Oregon's like on the cutting edge. They're on the forefront of,
Right.
writing the protocols, and some of the stuff from my book got into some of those protocols and procedures that Oregon is putting in place. I'm friends with Janice Phelps, who's with the CIIS, out in California. It's one of the very first psychedelic trainings, colleges. So, and she helped Oregon as well, kind of with getting their protocols right, and being the first place where this was going to be out in the United States. That's wonderful that your daughter and her
Yeah.
friends are doing this work. It's just so encouraging.
Mm. Thank you.
You're welcome, Shelley.
Nice to meet you.
Linda, did you want to jump in with a question or you're good? Okay,
No, I'm good.
okay. Anyone else have a question here? I think I've asked most of mine. Yeah, let's talk about budget. If I wanted to come down and see you and have all the sessions, how many pennies would I have to save up? Give me a ballpark what that might
Of course. And this
be.
is
If that's not
probably
too gauche to ask.
no, not at all. It's a very fair question. And depending on where you are across the country, the price varies greatly, right? So now you have to put this in the context that we're in Ocala, right? And so my pricing really reflects what the traffic will bear in Ocala. So it is, I mean, I literally have people who will fly across the country to come and do the sessions with me because they're not as expensive as on the West Coast. So the 212 session that I described to you, where we do the 2 pre-sessions, the 4-hour medicine session with the 2 sessions following, is $980. That session in anywhere on the West Coast would be $2,000 easily, if not more. You know, we're able to keep it affordable. I'm working in a space that makes it affordable for me to pass that on to the people that I'm working with as well. I don't have the rent that they have out in California and Oregon either, you know. So, you know, I'm passing that savings on to the people that I'm working with as well.
And so what kind of time frame would that be? So if you have 2 sessions before and 2 sessions after, then you have to stay there for a while, right? Is there?
Yeah, I would. So I can do the sessions on video just like we're doing right now. I can do the 2 pre-sessions on video, and then you fly in for the medicine session that day. And then you can stay that day. Maybe I would suggest 2 days, you know, at least before you drive or fly back. And then we can do the integrative sessions again, like this on the Zoom. So that would stretch it out maybe over, you know, a period of 6 weeks or so.
And does that include the ketamine? That price?
The medical evaluation is separate, but again, we're in Ocala. That medical evaluation is $150, which you will not find anywhere else in the country. And the ketamine is, you know, usually around $20 or something like that. We have a compound pharmacy that's not far from where I'm doing the service, that you can pick it up from there, or you can get it mailed to you in advance, right to your home.
Wonderful.
Depending
What a
on the
great-
amount that you get, it's between $20 and $40. Ketamine is very affordable too. That's another thing that's kind of nice about the ketamine. It's a little different than some of the others.
And what about psilocybin? Is that commercially available? Is that legal? I mean, I've never done any of these things, so
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oregon and Colorado have approved. It's not legalized in the sense that cannabis and marijuana is. They've just decriminalized it, and they're moving toward using it in a therapeutic setting. So all of the laws and the rules are changing around that to support that being used. At the MAPS conference, it was really interesting because the governor of Colorado spoke at the MAPS conference in Denver last year, and so did Perry. So they had a Democrat and a Republican on the same stage, and they were both saying, look, we have to do something different, particularly for our veterans and our first responders, because they're suffering and the suicide rate is way too high. And they collectively were supporting the use of the psychedelic medicines, the MDMA, the psilocybin, as a treatment modality that's been proven to be very effective. And so there's a lot of political will behind this now, which is really good to see.
Wow, that is really, really good news, especially the veterans. Yeah, my niece came back with PTSD after 2 tours in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And you know, she was able to get some help through, what was it you said, the Warriors?
Wounded Warriors.
Wounded Warriors, yes.
Mhm.
And she didn't use those. I think they just used marijuana. You know, they didn't use the others, but sure
Yeah.
helped her. I'll say that.
Yes.
Completely changed her life. You know, she's doing really well
Yes.
now.
Oh, I'm so
So,
glad to hear that, Noelle.
yeah, she's really a sweetheart. So, any other questions or comments here?
Thank you.
Oh,
Pop
thank
has been
you.
listening on his way home driving. Usually he brings in questions and comments from the Facebook, but I just couldn't do that. Had to be here. So,
Can I ask one quick question? One more quick question?
go ahead.
Yeah, is there enough time? Okay. And maybe you talked about this, but what about like using it for, let's say you have swelling in your leg for 3 years and nobody can figure it out. And and it's the truth. And I'm just curious in terms of actual physical things that are going on. Curious. Do you ever would that be an intent?
I probably, as a therapist, and that gets more into a little bit on the medical side of it, edema and why are we holding, why am I holding water and holding it only in one leg? What's up with his leg, or with this foot, but sometimes it's genetics too. Who knows, maybe it's back to the pre-birth, right? that one leg got really squeezed by the doctor.
Actually, don't laugh. Someone who I worked with, that actually came up. So that was very interesting. Yeah. So
yes.
I was just curious if you've had experience working. Okay. Thank you. I'll
thank you. Yeah. That was such a validation for you to tune in and to hear me tell that story, because I don't tell that story all the time. So that was definitely a validation for the work that you're doing. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just say, it's really a unique thing, I guess, that we're doing here. And I don't, being in it as I am at the moment, I don't realize it as much as what I see just Noelle's face smiling and her eyes lighting up like, you're doing what? And where? In the youth room. But it really is, it's healing, it is a healing thing. And I think it's been I know it's been part of spiritual ritual and ceremony for millennia, not LSD, but certainly mushrooms. And so yeah, there's a lot of rich history, and I'm excited to be part of that in the spiritual sense, as we see people again, just lives really transforming in beautiful ways, and having the spiritual community to wrap around them as they're going through their transition and their change. It's been really wonderful to watch. I don't know that any other spiritual communities, I don't know if anybody else is doing this kind of stuff. It's pretty fun.
I don't know of any. Maybe they all should. You're a way shower, Cindy.
Yeah.
Were you part of a documentary about this? I saw a documentary, I don't know, about a year, maybe I saw it on Gaia, I'm not sure, where there were women in it, not just women, there were people in a church that one day a month they had rituals that involved psychedelics.
I'd love to know who they are.
Yeah, okay. I was just wondering if that was you guys. I don't know. I'll have to.
William Henry. Didn't we go and see him with Mary Magdalene?
Yes.
And
Yes.
I think it's his sister who they do, I forget what they call it.
Yeah,
You're right. You're right. That's what it is.
Yeah, they're very it just seemed just very spiritual, very spirit centered.
What we are offering at the center on the 4th Sunday of every month, I'm speaking on the book, Psychedelic Dreams and Rituals, on a different chapter of the book. So if you enjoyed what you're hearing today, You can log on through the Center for Spiritual Living Ocala on the website or on the, Facebook, just like we're doing now. And then you can hear the message directly, each Sunday at 11 on the fourth Sunday. And then on that Sunday, we also do a psychedelic integration circle. No, it's a sober circle. There's nothing present, but it gives people that safe place where they can come and share about their experiences, which really helps with the harm reduction too, because you need to have a place, a safe container where you can come and share with people and just talk about your experience. And that's been really effective as well. So we are doing that every month at the Center for Spiritual Living in Ocala.
Yeah, I would encourage you to go to their website and they have YouTube. They, record all of their services. So that's where I first met Lynn, was sitting in the first row.
Yes.
Back
The one
then,
about
visit
the
Reverend
shadow
Cindy.
is really interesting. If you're interested in shadow work and shadow energy and how to, do that integration with the shadow, that one's really good. I did that one a couple months ago.
Yeah, that was after we left, but yeah, I'd highly recommend. So I want to thank you, Reverend Cindy and Lynn, for giving us 90 minutes precious of your time. Thank you, everyone, for coming. And, the service that you're giving to humanity is it's just growing. It's like a little seed pod that you all have popped out, and now it all needs to be replicated, with the love and the care and the authenticity that you all bring to the healing process of so many. That it's just a joy to be with you this evening.
I think Barbara would be very proud of us, Noelle.
Yeah. Now that's the question. Did Barbara ever do shrooms?
I
bet she did.
I would say yes.
Yeah,
I would say yes. I know
Yeah.
her sister did. The first time I ever met her sister, she said to me, "Have you ever done LSD?"
There you go.
That wasn't it. Well, it was 2017. So
well, her sister went to Berkeley.
yeah.
Yeah, I would think Barbara probably did, but she had to keep it low on the down low.
Well, thank you all for this wonderful evening that we co-created, and just really so appreciative. And remember, on June 13th, we're having Cindy back, and she will be our guest, and she's going to be talking about restorative justice. And if you haven't been, educated about the power of talk about healing and releasing, those circles are just tremendous. That's just amazing work. So you can learn about that and hear some of the wonderful experiences. Have you done it in the prisons yet, Cindy?
Have I done circles?
Yeah,
I've done workshop. I've not done an actual restorative circle, but I have taught about them. And I've done lots of teaching on trauma and social emotional learning and leadership skills. Yeah.
Good. Well, I need to learn about that too. So please come back on and to educate us all. So
Will do.
yeah. So wonderful. Thank you so much. It was absolutely just outstanding. I appreciate all that you gave to us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Night all.
Have a good night.
Everyone.